Welcome back on our tour of Israel. We're on a journey through the land of milk, where the shepherds make their home. And we're using David's famous Psalm 23 to lead us in our exploration. We've discovered that green pastures aren't so much green, and that still waters point to how desert people often experience water as dangerous. So now let's see what David has to show us next. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Let's zoom in on this typical hill in the Negev wilderness. Do you see the horizontal bands running across the landscape? For thousands of years, these small paths have been used by shepherds and their flocks to traverse the hillsides. Many of them provide good footholds and enough width, and others not so much. It's the shepherd's job to lead his or her flock along the ones that are free from danger and to choose those that lead to fresh grazing territory or back to the sheepfold. These would be the healthy paths, the right paths leading to life, what we might call the paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. As we discovered in our last session, in the Negev, you're not going to find a lot of shade. To gain some relief from the sun, you might even have to wait until later in the day when it sits lower in the sky and the hills can cast some shadows. The valleys benefiting from the shadows make for a cooler walk, but the darkness also comes with danger. Wild animals or bandits may await you there. Could it be that you've entered the valley of the shadow of death? For those who walk with the Good Shepherd, though, they fear no evil. Why? For he is with them. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. For this part of the psalm, we're going to head out of the Negev for just a moment so that I can share a different shepherding lesson with you. This is in the land of honey, obviously more suited for agriculture than where we came from. We're here in late June after the crop has been harvested, so the flocks are allowed to graze and everything that's left over. Now, when we were in Israel, we were constantly on the move. We began hikes about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and we continued until sunset, barely stopping for lunch. I mean, some days they threw a sandwich at us and we just kept walking. So the fact that our guide directed us to sit and just watch this shepherd for well over 20 minutes clued me in that this was going to be important. And the payoff was huge. Now, I do need to point out that this shepherd is a grown man, which would have been highly unusual in biblical times. Like a young David or even the shepherd girls that we saw in the last session, kids most often got the shepherding job. This modern-day shepherd also, he has a pretty big flock by biblical standards. And just to clarify, that's a rod that he's carrying. It's not a weapon. But we witnessed some fascinating things in our 20 minutes. For starters, this picture gives the impression that his flock remained well gathered. What was more common is that every few minutes we'd see one animal dart off in some random direction and then a few others would follow. The strange thing is that the original maverick looked different than the followers. Come to find out that the maverick was, in fact, not a sheep at all, but it was a goat. The followers were sheep. We saw this again and again. The goats were the headstrong ones. They consistently wanted to venture away from the flock, which would attract some of the sheep to then go along. Watching all this reminded me of one of Jesus' parables, as Matthew tells it in chapter 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. And then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it for me. And so the people identified as sheep, when the flock gets separated at the parable's beginning, are rewarded for following the shepherd's teaching to care for others. But what about those goats that the Son of Man put to his left? Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they will also say, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? And he will reply, truly I tell you that whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. And then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Now, I've always thought it strange how Jesus does this separation thing according to species. I mean, what did he have against goats? But as we witnessed that 100% of the time, the goats were the ones leading the others astray, I could see how Jesus would cast the goats as those not following the shepherd's wishes. Now, the other interesting thing that we saw with this shepherd is that every 20 seconds or so, he would pick up a small stone because they were everywhere in that field, and he would cast it towards the straying sheep and goats. We watched him throw dozens of stones, and his aim, it was amazing. He would never hit one of his animals. He would just have that stone pass just to the right or slightly to the left of that animal's head, such that they would turn and head back to the main flock. The other shepherding tool that he used continuously was his voice. As he cast a stone, he would call out with a yit, yit, which the animals would hear and respond to. They knew his voice. Now, I'm sure we peppered our guides with questions, but I remember two of these really distinctively. The first, we asked, you know his voice? It's got to be shot after just a short time. Can't he use a whistle or something? And the guide answered, the flock will absolutely not respond. It has got to be his voice. And our second question, why don't they just get rid of the goats? It would make the shepherd's job a whole lot easier. And our guide's answer, the goats are invaluable because of their milk. They are incredibly important, and they need to be shepherded just as much as the sheep. Which got me to thinking, is there any way that a shepherd could ever get a goat to aid him in his shepherding mission, kind of like a border collie would? I know that's probably a ridiculous thought, since this seems not to be in a goat's nature, but still, it makes me wonder if that's why God seems so interested in those straying prodigals in our stories. If he could just get a maverick to sign on, just think of the possibilities. Join in next time, where we're going to encounter another shepherd in the Negev and follow him to a unique experience of desert hospitality. We'll see you then. So thanks for coming along on this short journey into the Bible text. I hope you've noticed something new in the landscape, or maybe even a fresh way to view territory that you've covered many times before. Whatever the case, it's good to have you along for the trip. You never know what we might discover as we crack open this fascinating text together.